The crimson sand of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly under twin suns, painted with the metallic gleam of scattered debris from the orbital bombardment 3 days prior. Captain Marcus Chen adjusted his environmental suit's filters as another gust of toxic wind swept across the wasteland. His patrol unit had been sweeping the outer colonies for survivors since the Zephyrian Empire's latest cleansing operation, though Command expected to find nothing but corpses and ash. Marcus had seen enough death in his 12 years of service to know the signs. The distinctive blue-green blood spatters on the rocks ahead belonged to a Thralaxian, one of the few species brave enough to openly defy Zephyrian rule. Most were dead now, their rebellion crushed with the same systematic brutality the Empire used across 17 star systems. Something moved behind a cluster of twisted metal that had once been a supply depot. Marcus raised his plasma rifle, scanning through his helmet's enhanced optics. The heat signature was weak, barely registering above the ambient temperature. Whatever it was dying. He approached cautiously, knowing that desperate beings could be dangerous even in their final moments. What he found made him freeze in place. A young Thralaxian female lay crumpled against the debris, her chitinous armor cracked and leaking. Her forearms were bent at unnatural angles, and her large multifaceted eyes had lost their usual luminescent glow. The translator in his helmet identified her rapid, shallow breathing as the equivalent of human panic. She couldn't be more than 20 standard years old, barely an adult by Thralaxian standards. Her sleek insectoid features were marred by deep burns from energy weapons, and her normally iridescent carapace had turned a sickly gray. Blue blood pooled beneath her broken body, mixing with the alien sand to form an unnatural purple mud. Marcus lowered his weapon and activated his medical scanner. The readings were grim. Multiple organ failures, severe radiation poisoning, and blood loss that should have killed her hours ago. Yet somehow she was still breathing, still fighting. There was something fierce in her alien features, a stubborn refusal to surrender that reminded him of his own species' legendary persistence. The smart thing would be to call it in and move on. Thralaxians were enemies of humanity's Terran Federation, at least officially. They'd chosen to resist the Zephyrian Empire while humanity had negotiated an uneasy alliance, trading resources and territory for protection. Helping her could be seen as treason, especially if she was one of the rebels who'd been raiding Federation supply lines. But as Marcus knelt beside her broken form, he remembered why he'd joined the military in the first place. It wasn't for politics or territory or even his own species. It was for moments like this when the choice between right and wrong became crystal clear, stripped of all the complicated justifications that politicians use to sleep at night. The Thralaxian's eyes focused on him with tremendous effort. Her translator, still functioning despite the damage to her body, converted her whispered words into perfect English. "Human, why do you not finish what your allies started?" Marcus pulled out his emergency medical kit, designed primarily for human physiology, but equipped with universal trauma treatments that worked on most carbon-based life forms. "Because leaving someone to die in the sand isn't what humans do," he said, injecting her with broad-spectrum antibiotics and pain suppressors. "Not the good ones, anyway." She made a sound that might have been laughter if her lungs weren't filled with fluid. "Your Federation sells us to the Empire for mining rights. You profit from our suffering." "Maybe some do," Marcus admitted, working to stabilize her broken limbs with emergency splints. "But I'm not the Federation. I'm just one person, and right now you need help." His actions defied every protocol he'd been trained to follow. Unauthorized medical treatment of enemy combatants. Potential violation of the non-interference accords. Wasting military resources on a being who would likely die anyway. Command would have his rank and probably his freedom if they found out. But Marcus had spent too many years watching good people die, while bureaucrats argued about jurisdiction and political ramifications. He'd seen entire colonies wiped out because someone in an office light years away had decided they weren't worth the cost of protection. The Thralaxian rebellion might be doomed, but this one life wasn't. Not if he could help it. The girl's breathing began to steady as the medical nanites in his injections started their work. Her eyes clearer now, studied his face through his helmet's transparent visor. "What is your name, human?" "Marcus Chen, Captain Terran Federation Marines." "And you?" "Zixandra of the 7th Clutch, Resistance Fighter, Free Thralaxian Coalition." Her formal introduction was interrupted by a fit of coughing that brought up more blue blood. I was sabotaging Zephyrian supply lines when their patrol found me. My squad is dead. I should be dead. Marcus checked his scanner again. The nanites were buying time, but she needed real medical attention soon. His transport was 3 kilometers away, parked at the edge of the devastation zone. Even with her injuries stabilized, moving her that distance would be incredibly risky. Can you travel? He asked, already knowing the answer but hoping anyway. Zixandra tried to move and immediately went rigid with pain. My spine. I cannot feel my lower limbs. Leave me, human. Your kindness is appreciated but pointless. Marcus stood and activated his suit's emergency beacon, then immediately disabled it. He couldn't call for medical evacuation without explaining why he was treating an enemy combatant. Instead, he began gathering materials from the debris around them. If she couldn't come to his transport, he'd bring the transport's medical bay to her. I told you, he said, pulling usable components from the wreckage. Leaving people to die isn't what humans do. We're notoriously stubborn about these things. It's going to get us in trouble someday. For the first time since he'd found her, Zixandra's eyes showed something other than pain and resignation. It might have been hope or maybe just confusion at this human's inexplicable behavior. Either way, Marcus had made his choice. Politics and protocols could wait. Right now there was work to do. Marcus worked through the night, his suit's floodlights casting harsh shadows across the alien landscape. He'd managed to cobble together a makeshift stretcher from debris and emergency materials, but moving Zixandra remained dangerous. Her spinal injuries required careful handling that his field training hadn't prepared him for. You should rest, she whispered, watching him modify his medical scanner to work with Thralaxian physiology. Your body requires sleep cycles. Humans can go without sleep longer than most species think, Marcus replied, though exhaustion was beginning to weigh on him. We evolved as persistence hunters. When we decide something needs doing, we just keep going until it's done. He'd been studying her biology through his scanner's database, cross-referencing Thralaxian anatomy with emergency medical procedures. Their nervous systems were more complex than human ones, with redundant pathways that might explain how she'd survived injuries that would have killed most beings instantly. But those same redundancies made treatment more complicated. Zixandra's translator crackled with static before producing her words. My people have legends about humans. We call you the Endless Ones because you never know when to surrender. Most species consider it a form of madness. Maybe it is, Marcus admitted, carefully adjusting the neural stabilizer he'd jury-rigged from his suit's emergency systems. But it's the kind of madness that keeps people alive. Dawn brought new problems. Marcus's absence from his patrol route would be noticed soon, and search teams would be dispatched. He couldn't explain why he'd gone dark for over 12 hours without revealing what he'd found. Worse, Zixandra's condition had stabilized but not improved. She needed surgery that was far beyond his capabilities. There is a place, she said weakly as he checked her vital signs again. An old research station, abandoned since the Empire took this system. My people, we converted it to a medical facility. If it still stands, Marcus pulled up his tactical maps. The location she described was 40 kilometers away, through territory that showed heavy Zephyrian patrol activity. Getting there would mean abandoning his post entirely and venturing into what amounted to enemy territory. The Empire will have destroyed it, he said, though he was already calculating routes and travel times. Perhaps. But Thralaxian construction is resilient. We build to last through bombardments. Her eyes dimmed slightly. It is the only chance. Unless your Federation medicine. Marcus shook his head. Human and Thralaxian physiology were too different. Their medical technology required specialized equipment and knowledge that the Federation had never bothered to acquire. Why learn to heal your enemies when it was easier to kill them? He made his decision with the same stubborn certainty that had gotten him into this situation. Then we go to your medical station. But first I need to make some arrangements. Marcus activated his emergency communicator and composed a message to his commanding officer. He reported technical difficulties with his equipment and requested permission to extend his patrol to investigate energy readings in the outer sectors. It was technically a lie, but it would buy him time. The response came back within an hour. Permission granted, but he was to maintain regular contact and return to base within 48 hours. Marcus grimaced as he shut off the communicator. 48 hours to travel 80 kilometers round trip through hostile territory, find an abandoned medical facility, somehow perform surgery on an alien he'd never treated before, and get back without anyone asking awkward questions. Impossible odds, he muttered, then looked down at Zixandra's determined face. Just the way humans like them. The journey began badly and got worse. Marcus had rigged a hover sled from his emergency gear, but the device was never designed to carry a full-grown Thrallaxian across rough terrain. It kept threatening to fail, forcing him to stop and make repairs with dwindling supplies. Zixandra remained conscious throughout the ordeal, offering directions and warnings about local hazards. Her knowledge of the terrain was impressive, gained through months of guerrilla operations against Zephyrian forces. She guided him through hidden valleys and natural caves that shielded them from aerial patrols. "Why do this?" she asked during one of their rest stops. "Your Federation gains nothing from my survival. If anything, healing me weakens your position with the Empire." Marcus checked his water supplies, calculating how much he could spare for her hydration needs. Thrallaxians required less water than humans but needed specific mineral supplements that his rations couldn't provide. "Maybe because it's the right thing to do," he said. "Maybe because I'm tired of watching the strong prey on the weak, while everyone else looks the other way. Or maybe because you remind me of someone." "Someone?" Marcus hesitated, then continued. "My sister. She was about your age when she died fighting pirates in the Vega system. She could have surrendered, could have saved herself, but she kept fighting to protect a civilian transport. The survivors said she never gave up, even when her ship was coming apart around her." Zixandra was quiet for a long moment. "She sounds like a true warrior. She was stubborn just like every other human who's ever lived. We don't know when to quit." Marcus stood and checked his equipment. "Speaking of which, we need to keep moving. Those patrol ships won't stay on the other side of that ridge forever." They traveled through the heat of the day, Marcus pushing himself beyond normal human endurance, while Zixandra drifted in and out of consciousness on the improvised stretcher. Her breathing remained steady, but her color continued to worsen. The medical nanites were losing their effectiveness, her alien immune system finally beginning to reject the foreign technology. As the twin suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they crested a ridge and saw their destination. The research station clung to the side of a cliff face, its biometallic construction scarred but intact. Zephyrian bombardment had collapsed several sections, but the core structure remained. "It still stands," Zixandra whispered, her voice filled with something that might have been relief or perhaps just surprise. Marcus studied the approach routes through his scope. The path was treacherous, designed to be defensible against ground assault. For someone carrying a critically injured patient, it would be nearly impossible. Nearly impossible had never stopped a human before. Marcus began planning their ascent, already working out which pieces of equipment he could sacrifice to reduce weight and which tools he'd need to fabricate climbing aids. "Rest," he told Zixandra as he began his preparations. "Tomorrow we climb." The climb took 6 hours. Marcus had stripped his equipment down to absolute essentials, converting his hover sled into a climbing harness and using his emergency cables to create a pulley system. Every meter upward was a battle against gravity, exhaustion, and the growing certainty that he was attempting something beyond human capability. But humans had a long history of attempting the impossible and succeeding through sheer bloody-mindedness. Marcus focused on one handhold at a time, one step at a time, refusing to acknowledge the drop beneath them or the weight of Zixandra's unconscious form, secured to his improvised rig. Halfway up the cliff face, his equipment began to fail. The makeshift pulley system groaned under the strain, and one of his anchor points showed stress fractures. Marcus hung suspended against the rock, breathing hard, calculating whether he could make the remaining distance if the system collapsed. "I am awake," Zixandra's voice crackled through their comlink. "Leave me here. Continue alone." "Not happening," Marcus replied, checking his remaining climbing gear. "We're over the worst of it now." That was a lie. The worst part was yet to come, a 30-meter vertical section with no obvious handholds. But Marcus had noticed something during his reconnaissance that might work. The research station's builders had used biometallic construction that grew rather than being assembled. The walls showed the same organic patterns as living Thrallaxian carapaces, with natural grip points that only someone familiar with their physiology would recognize. He began to climb again, following the subtle ridges and depressions that Thrylaxian builders had incorporated into their design. His human hands weren't ideally suited for the grips, but they worked well enough. The final approach was a controlled scramble, over loose debris and into the station's damaged entrance. The interior was a mixture of advanced technology and organic architecture that made Marcus feel like he was inside some massive creature. Bioluminescent panels still provided dim lighting, powered by geothermal taps that had survived the bombardment. The air was stale but breathable, filtered through living membranes that adapted to atmospheric conditions. Medical bay, lower level, Zixandra whispered as Marcus carried her deeper into the facility. Follow the blue guide lights. The lights led them through corridors lined with equipment Marcus didn't recognize. Some of it was clearly medical technology, but designed for beings with very different physiological needs than humans. He found the medical bay in the station's heart, a circular chamber filled with devices that looked more grown than manufactured. Zixandra's breathing became more labored as Marcus placed her on the central treatment platform. Her immune system was finally rejecting his makeshift medical interventions, and her body was beginning to shut down. Without proper treatment soon, she would die within hours. The console. There, she managed, indicating a control surface covered in symbols that shifted and changed as Marcus watched. It responds to Thrylaxian biorhythms. I must guide you. Marcus placed his hand over hers on the control surface. The device immediately came alive, scanning both of them and displaying information in languages he couldn't read. Zixandra began speaking in her native tongue, her words causing the medical systems to respond. It wants to know why a human seeks to heal a Thrylaxian, she translated. The security protocols were not designed for this. Tell it the truth, Marcus said, that sometimes the right thing to do doesn't make sense to computers. Zixandra made a sound that might have been laughter, then spoke rapidly to the machine. The scanning beams intensified, examining her injuries in detail, while other systems began preparing treatment options. Marcus watched readouts he couldn't understand cascade across displays, hoping that Thrylaxian medical technology was as advanced as their reputation suggested. It will work, Zixandra said finally, but the procedure requires constant monitoring. Someone must guide the systems, make decisions as conditions change. I cannot remain conscious through the process. Marcus looked at the alien control systems, trying to understand what she was asking. You need me to operate their medical equipment? I don't know anything about Thrylaxian anatomy. The machine knows, but it requires sapient oversight, judgment calls that only a thinking being can make. Her eyes fixed on his. It will teach you as we proceed. But if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. Humans are excellent at learning under pressure. It's how we survived long enough to reach the stars. The medical procedure began with a detailed scan that mapped every injury in Zixandra's body. Marcus watched the displays, following along as the system's AI explained the treatment plan in simplified terms. The damage was extensive but repairable if everything went perfectly. Nothing ever went perfectly, especially when humans were involved. 3 hours into the surgery, complications arose. Zixandra's nervous system began rejecting the neural repairs, triggering cascading failures that threatened to kill her. The medical AI presented Marcus with options, each with different risks and success rates. Marcus chose the most aggressive treatment, the one with the highest chance of complete recovery, but also the greatest risk of catastrophic failure. It was a human choice, the decision of a species that had never learned to accept reasonable losses. Why do you push so hard? The medical AI asked through the translation system, its voice curious rather than critical. Less aggressive treatment offers acceptable outcomes with minimal risk. Marcus watched Zixandra's vital signs fluctuate on displays he was only beginning to understand. Because acceptable isn't good enough. She deserves better than just surviving. She deserves to thrive. The AI processed this for several seconds before responding. This is the human concept of hope that our databases reference. The statistical probability of optimal outcomes does not justify the risk. Statistics don't account for determination, Marcus replied, making another judgment call as Zixandra's cardiovascular system struggled to adapt to the neural repairs. Sometimes caring enough to take the risk is what makes the difference. The surgery continued through the night, with Marcus learning Thrylaxian medicine at a pace that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. But there was nothing normal about a human operating alien medical equipment to save a member of an enemy species. The absurdity of the situation seemed perfectly appropriate to Marcus. Humans had always excelled at doing the impossible simply because no one had told them it couldn't be done. As dawn light filtered through the station's damaged walls, the medical systems finally signaled completion. Zixandra's vital signs had stabilized, her neural pathways were functioning normally, and the structural damage to her body had been repaired. Marcus slumped against the control console, exhausted but triumphant. "She will live," the medical AI announced. "Full recovery is probable within 72 standard hours." This outcome exceeded projected probabilities by significant margins. Marcus looked down at Zixandra's sleeping form, her carapace already showing signs of healthy regeneration. "That's what humans do," he said quietly. "We exceed probabilities." Zixandra woke 18 hours later to find Marcus slumped in a chair beside her recovery bed, fast asleep with his hand still resting near the medical controls. Her body felt strange, different than before her injuries. The pain was gone, replaced by a strength she hadn't felt since childhood. Every nerve ending seemed sharper, more responsive. She sat up carefully, testing her renewed mobility. Her lower limbs responded perfectly, her spine flexible and strong. The human had not merely saved her life. He had somehow convinced alien technology to heal her better than she had ever been. Marcus stirred as she moved, his exhausted eyes focusing on her with obvious relief. "How do you feel?" "Different, stronger." She examined her hands, noting that even old scars from training accidents had vanished. "What did you do to me?" Marcus rubbed his face, still groggy from his brief rest. "I followed the medical AI's recommendations, but I kept pushing for optimal outcomes instead of just functional ones. Apparently, Thrillaxian regenerative medicine can do more than just repair damage if you're willing to risk the advanced procedures." Zixandra stood and walked around the medical bay, marveling at her improved coordination and strength. "The risks? Significant chance of complete neural system failure," Marcus admitted. "About 30% probability of death during the procedure." The AI recommended against it. She stared at him in shock. "You risked my life on 30% odds?" "I risked your life on 70% odds of giving you a complete recovery, instead of just keeping you alive as a cripple," Marcus corrected. Humans don't believe in settling for half measures when someone's future is at stake. Before Zixandra could respond, alarms began echoing through the medical facility. Marcus rushed to the station's surveillance systems, his expression growing grim as he reviewed the displays. Zephyrian patrol ships, 3 of them, approaching from the east. They must have tracked my energy signature or detected the medical systems. He began gathering their equipment. "We need to leave now." Zixandra moved to the weapon storage lockers, her enhanced reflexes making the motion fluid and quick. "No, I am done running from the Empire." "You just finished recovering from injuries that should have killed you," Marcus protested. "This isn't the time for heroics." She turned to face him, her multifaceted eyes blazing with new determination. "This is exactly the time. You have shown me something human. You risked everything for someone you barely knew, someone your own government considers an enemy. If one person can care that much, perhaps there is hope for more." Marcus watched her arm herself with weapons from the facility's defensive systems. Her movements were precise, confident, enhanced by the medical procedures that had improved her neural responses. She was no longer the broken refugee he had found in the sand. She was something else entirely, something dangerous. "The Zephyrians aren't coming here by accident," she continued, checking the charge on an energy rifle designed for her four-armed grip. "They have been hunting me specifically. I carry information about their supply routes, their weakness points. Information my people died to gather. Then we get you out of here so you can deliver that information," Marcus said, though he was also checking his own weapons. Zixandra shook her head. "The patrol ships carry communication arrays. If they report my survival, the Empire will change their routes, move their supplies. The intelligence will become worthless." She moved toward the station's defensive controls. "But if they simply disappear?" Marcus understood immediately. 3 Zephyrian patrol ships vanishing without explanation would be blamed on equipment failure or rebel attack. The Empire wouldn't know their security had been compromised. But taking on 3 military vessels with a single defender, and whatever weapons the research station might have was suicide. You're talking about fighting 3 ships with military crews, he pointed out. Even with the station's defenses, the odds are impossible. Zixandra's alien features showed something that might have been a smile. I have learned something from you, Marcus Chen. Sometimes impossible odds just mean you need to be more creative. She activated the station's defense grid, bringing weapon systems online that had been dormant since the bombardment. The facility had been built as a research station, but Thrallaxian construction philosophy meant it could serve as a fortress when necessary. Hidden gun emplacements emerged from the cliff face while shield generators hummed to life. This is still insane, Marcus muttered, but he was already moving to assist her. His knowledge of human military tactics, combined with her understanding of Thrallaxian technology, might actually give them a chance. The first Zephyrian ship arrived within the hour, a sleek Predator-class vessel designed for hunting small groups of rebels. It approached cautiously, scanning the apparently dead research station for signs of life. Marcus and Zixandra waited until it was committed to its approach vector before opening fire. The station's weapons were older than the Zephyrian ship, but more powerful than its pilots expected. The first salvo overwhelmed its shields and crippled its engines, sending it spinning into the cliff face in a ball of superheated plasma. The second ship arrived to find its companion destroyed and immediately began evasive maneuvers. Its captain was more experienced, using the mountain terrain to break targeting locks while returning fire with precision strikes. The station's shields held, but each impact drained power from systems they needed for the approaching battle with the third vessel. Their weapons are more advanced than our defenses, Zixandra observed, tracking the ship's movements through the targeting systems. We cannot win a straight fight. Marcus studied the tactical display, noting the ship's flight patterns and weapon capabilities. Then we don't fight straight. Humans learned a long time ago that if you can't win by playing fair, you change the rules. He began reprogramming the station's shield generators, reducing their defensive capability but increasing their projective range. Instead of protecting the facility, he was turning them into weapons, creating gravity distortions that would interfere with the Zephyrian ship's navigation systems. The second ship's next attack run became a disaster, as its pilot suddenly found himself flying through unstable gravity fields that played havoc with his instruments. The vessel slammed into a mountain peak, its destruction lighting up the canyon like a second sun. The third ship arrived to find 2 of its companions destroyed and a research station that was somehow still fighting. Its captain was smart enough to maintain maximum range while calling for reinforcements, but Marcus and Zixandra had anticipated this. Now, Zixandra whispered, triggering the trap they had prepared. The station's communication array, modified with human ingenuity and Thrallaxian technology, sent a burst of electromagnetic interference that fried the Zephyrian ship's communication systems. At the same moment, Marcus activated the gravity field generators at maximum power, creating a localized space-time distortion that pulled the vessel inexorably toward the station's weapons. The third ship died in a storm of energy fire, its wreckage joining its companions in the growing debris field around the research facility. Marcus and Zixandra stood in the sudden silence, watching the last pieces of burning metal fall into the canyon below. They had done the impossible, but Marcus knew it was only the beginning. They'll send more ships when these don't report in, he said. Zixandra nodded, but her expression was determined rather than worried. Yes, but now I have something more valuable than just intelligence about their supply routes. What's that? She turned to look at him, her alien features showing an emotion he was learning to recognize as hope. Proof that humans and Thrallaxians can fight together and win. That might be worth more than any military intelligence. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation and planning. Marcus's deadline for returning to base had expired, and he knew search teams would be looking for him soon. But the situation had evolved beyond a simple rescue mission. The intelligence Zixandra carried could change the entire dynamic of the war if it reached the right people. She had been part of a deep reconnaissance unit that had penetrated Zephyrian space and discovered something the Empire desperately wanted to keep secret. Their primary military shipyards, thought to be impregnable fortress systems, were actually dependent on a single supply chain that passed through neutral space. If that supply line were disrupted, Zixandra explained as they reviewed star charts in the research station's database, Their entire military production would collapse within months. But the information is useless unless it reaches both human and Thrallaxian command structures simultaneously. Marcus studied the data, recognizing the strategic implications immediately. The Federation would never act on intelligence provided by the Resistance. They'd assume it was a trap or misinformation. And my people would never trust intelligence that came through human channels, Zixandra agreed. The Empire has used false information to lure rebel fleets into ambushes too many times. They were discussing the problem when the research station's long-range sensors detected multiple contacts approaching from different vectors. Marcus checked the readings and felt his stomach drop. 8 ships coming from 3 different directions, too coordinated to be coincidence. They didn't just send reinforcements, he realized. They sent a proper military response. We're looking at a squadron-level assault. Zixandra was already activating the station's defensive systems, but they both knew the facility couldn't withstand a sustained attack from that many vessels. The earlier battle had demonstrated their capabilities, but it had also revealed their limitations. We need to evacuate, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure how. The research station's emergency escape pods had been damaged in the original bombardment, and their makeshift transport wouldn't survive in space. No, Zixandra said quietly. We need to transmit. Marcus looked at her in confusion. Transmit what? Everything. The intelligence about the supply chain, the records of our cooperation, proof that humans and Thrallaxians can work together. She was already configuring the station's communication array. Send it everywhere to both sides, to neutral systems, to anyone who will listen. That will reveal our location immediately, Marcus protested. Every Zephyrian ship in the system will converge on us. Zixandra's alien features showed grim determination. They are already converging on us. But if we broadcast everything on all frequencies, some of it will get through. The truth will survive even if we do not. Marcus understood what she was proposing. It was essentially a suicide mission, using their deaths to ensure the information reached people who could act on it. It was the kind of stubborn, self-sacrificing gesture that humans were famous for throughout the galaxy. There might be another way, he said slowly, an idea forming. What if we don't just broadcast the information? What if we broadcast ourselves? Zixandra tilted her head in the Thrallaxian gesture of confusion. Explain. Marcus began working with the communication system, his enhanced understanding of Thrallaxian technology allowing him to attempt modifications that would have been impossible days earlier. Live transmission, real-time communication with both Federation and Resistance command structures. Let them see us working together, hear us explain the intelligence firsthand. They will still assume deception, Zixandra pointed out. Maybe, but it's harder to dismiss something when you're watching it happen. Marcus activated multiple communication channels simultaneously, and if they see us die defending this information, they might believe it's important enough to investigate. The first response came from Federation Command, demanding to know why Captain Marcus Chen was operating outside his authorized patrol area and consorting with enemy combatants. The second came from the Free Thrallaxian Coalition, equally suspicious of their fighter cooperating with a human military officer. This is Captain Marcus Chen, Terran Federation Marines, Marcus began, staring directly into the visual pickup. I am transmitting from a Thrallaxian research facility in the Kepler 442 system, along with Zixandra of the 7th Clutch, a Resistance intelligence operative. I am broadcasting vital strategic intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities, Zixandra added, her translator converting her words into multiple languages simultaneously. This information was gathered at the cost of my entire reconnaissance unit's lives. They began transmitting the intelligence data while explaining how they had come to work together. Marcus described finding Zixandra dying in the desert and his decision to risk everything to save her life. She detailed the medical procedure that had not only healed her injuries, but enhanced her capabilities beyond their original levels. Captain Chen risked court-martial and execution to preserve my life, Zixandra stated clearly. He demonstrated that humans are capable of compassion that transcends political boundaries. This cooperation is proof that our species can work together against our common enemy. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Federation Command demanded Marcus's immediate surrender for unauthorized contact with enemy forces. The Resistance leadership questioned Zixandra's loyalty and demanded proof that she hadn't been compromised by human manipulation. But other voices began joining the transmission. Individual ship captains, colony administrators, and military units from both sides who recognized the value of what they were seeing. A human and a Thrallaxian working together seamlessly, sharing intelligence that could save thousands of lives. The approaching Zephyrian squadron opened fire just as the broadcast reached its widest distribution. The research station's shields held against the initial barrage, but Marcus could see the power levels dropping with each impact. They had minutes, maybe less, before the facility's defenses collapsed entirely. "The transmission is reaching 17 star systems," Zixandra reported, her 4 hands working multiple control surfaces simultaneously. Both human and Thrallaxian forces are receiving the intelligence data. Marcus divided his attention between the weapons controls and the communication array, watching as their broadcast spread across the galaxy. Individual commanders were beginning to respond, some with skepticism, others with growing interest. Most importantly, several neutral systems were acknowledging receipt of the strategic intelligence. "Even if they don't believe us," Marcus said as another barrage rocked the station, "they'll investigate the supply route. That's all we need." The shields failed during the next attack, leaving the research station defenseless against the Zephyrian assault. Energy beams tore through the facility's biometallic walls, destroying equipment and causing atmospheric breaches. Marcus and Zixandra retreated to the station's core, where the emergency life support systems gave them a few more minutes. "This is the end of our transmission," Zixandra announced to their audience across 17 star systems. "But it is not the end of our cooperation. We have proven that humans and Thrallaxians can work together. We hope others will follow our example." Marcus activated the station's self-destruct sequence, knowing that the Zephyrians couldn't be allowed to capture any survivors or remaining intelligence. To anyone listening, he said, "Remember that sometimes the right thing to do doesn't make political sense. Sometimes you just have to trust that other people are capable of doing the right thing too." The final barrage began, but it was interrupted by something neither Marcus nor Zixandra had expected. New contacts appeared on the failing sensor grid, ships dropping out of hyperspace with the energy signatures of both Federation and Resistance vessels. "This is Admiral Sarah Martinez, commanding TFS Relentless," came a voice over the communication channel. "We are here to provide assistance to Captain Chen and the Thrallaxian operative." "Free Thrallaxian vessel, Storm of Justice acknowledging," added another voice. "We stand ready to defend our sister Zixandra and her human ally." Marcus stared at the tactical display in amazement. A mixed fleet of human and Thrallaxian ships had arrived, working together to engage the Zephyrian squadron. It was unprecedented, the first cooperative military action between their species in over a century. The battle was brief, but decisive. The Zephyrian forces, outnumbered and surprised by the unprecedented cooperation between their enemies, attempted to retreat. Most didn't make it to hyperspace. As rescue teams from both fleets converged on the damaged research station, Marcus and Zixandra looked at each other with a mixture of exhaustion and amazement. "We started something," Zixandra said quietly. Marcus nodded, watching human and Thrallaxian rescue teams work together to extract them from the wreckage. "Let's hope we live long enough to see where it leads." The diplomatic station orbiting Proxima Centauri had been hastily constructed to accommodate the most unlikely peace conference in galactic history. Representatives from the Terran Federation, the Free Thrallaxian Coalition, and even several neutral systems had gathered to discuss what the media was calling the Chen-Zixandra Protocols, a framework for cooperation based on the partnership that had saved both their lives. Marcus stood before the assembled diplomats, still wearing his military uniform, but no longer carrying the rank insignia of a Federation officer. His unauthorized actions had technically made him a fugitive from military justice, though public opinion across human space had made prosecuting him politically impossible. The intelligence provided by Zixandra has been verified by 3 independent sources, he reported to the mixed audience. The Zephyrian supply chain vulnerabilities are real, and coordinated strikes by both human and Thrallaxian forces could cripple their military production within 6 months. Zixandra spoke next, her translator rendering her words into perfect diplomatic standard. "But such coordination requires trust that has not existed between our species for generations. Captain Chen demonstrated that this trust is possible through individual action. We must now demonstrate it on a larger scale. The response from the assembled diplomats was predictably mixed. Admiral Zhang of the Federation Navy expressed concerns about operational security and chain of command issues. Commander Thexval of the Thrallaxian Resistance questioned whether humans could be trusted to honor agreements when their commercial interests were at stake. The Empire has spent decades keeping us divided, Marcus continued. They've convinced humans that Thrallaxians are dangerous fanatics, and they've convinced Thrallaxians that humans are opportunistic collaborators. Both perspectives contain enough truth to be believable, but they ignore our common interests. Which are? Asked Ambassador Stevens, the Federation's chief negotiator. Marcus looked at Zixandra, who nodded for him to continue. They had discussed this moment many times during their recovery and subsequent debriefing. Survival, Marcus said simply. The Zephyrian Empire has a 1,000-year plan for galactic expansion. They've been conquering or subjugating species for centuries, and they won't stop with Thrallaxians. Humans are next on their list, probably within the next 50 years. The room erupted in arguments and protests, with Federation representatives insisting that their treaties with the Empire guaranteed human security. Marcus waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Those treaties are temporary conveniences, he stated. The Empire honors them only as long as we're useful. Once they've finished eliminating the resistance and consolidating Thrallaxian space, they'll find excuses to expand into human territory. Commander Thexaval's carapace shifted colors in what Marcus had learned to recognize as agreement. The Empire's expansion follows predictable patterns. They isolate target species diplomatically, then use manufactured conflicts to justify military intervention. They attempted this with our people for decades before we finally resisted. But resistance alone isn't enough, Zixandra added. My people have fought bravely for generations, but we lack the industrial capacity and resources to win alone. Similarly, humans have the technology and infrastructure to resist Empire expansion, but they lack the experience and knowledge of Empire tactics that we have gained through centuries of conflict. Admiral Zhang leaned forward in his chair. You're proposing a formal military alliance. That would mean abandoning our treaties with the Empire and committing to open warfare. I'm proposing that we stop pretending we can avoid that warfare indefinitely, Marcus replied. The Empire will come for humanity eventually. The question is whether we face them alone or with allies who know how to fight them. The debates continued for days, with representatives shuttling between formal sessions and private meetings. Marcus and Zixandra found themselves at the center of every discussion, their partnership serving as both an example of what was possible and a test case for whether such cooperation could work on a larger scale. During a break in negotiations, they stood together on the station's observation deck, watching ships from both fleets maintaining an uneasy but peaceful formation in space. Do you think they'll agree? Zixandra asked, her translator rendering her words with the subtle emotional nuances Marcus had learned to recognize. Some will, he replied. Others will need more convincing. But we've started something that can't be stopped. Individual captains and commanders are already cooperating in small ways. They've seen what we accomplished together. The Empire will not ignore this development, she pointed out. They will attempt to drive wedges between our species, create incidents that make cooperation seem impossible. Marcus nodded, watching a Federation destroyer maneuver alongside a Thrallaxian frigate in a joint patrol formation. Probably. But they're going to find that harder than they expect. Humans are stubborn about protecting things they care about, and now they care about protecting Thrallaxians. You're not just allies anymore. You're friends. The breakthrough came on the 4th day of negotiations, when Ambassador Stevens announced that the Federation Council had authorized limited military cooperation with resistance forces. Commander Thexaval responded by offering to share intelligence about Empire military capabilities with Federation forces. It wasn't the comprehensive alliance that Marcus and Zixandra had hoped for, but it was a beginning. More importantly, it was a public commitment that both sides would find difficult to abandon when the Empire inevitably attempted to sabotage the cooperation. Phase 1 complete, Zixandra observed as they watched the signing ceremony. Marcus smiled, remembering his first glimpse of her broken form in the alien desert. Ready for Phase 2? Always, she replied, her translator somehow conveying the grin that human expressions couldn't show. "What did you have in mind?" "Well," Marcus said, pulling up tactical displays on his personal tablet. "There's this Zephyrian supply depot in the Vega system that's been causing problems for both our fleets. I was thinking we might pay it a visit." Zixandra's carapace shifted to the color pattern Marcus had learned indicated anticipation and excitement. Now that sounds like a properly human plan. Completely insane and probably impossible. The best kind, Marcus agreed, already beginning to plot their next adventure. "Ready to show the galaxy what real cooperation looks like. Lead the way, Marcus Chen. I will follow you anywhere." 2 years later, the joint human Thrillaxian task force known as Unity Squadron had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Their impossible victories against Zephyrian forces had inspired similar cooperative units across both species' militaries, fundamentally changing the nature of the war. Marcus, now holding the rank of colonel in the newly formed Cooperative Defense Force, stood on the bridge of the experimental vessel Harmony, watching the final preparations for their most ambitious operation yet. The ship itself was a symbol of what they had accomplished. Human engineering enhanced with Thrillaxian biotechnology, crewed by both species working in perfect coordination. "Final assault wave is in position," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, the ship's human tactical officer. "All units report ready. Thrillaxian stealth ships have disabled the outer sensor grid," added Flight Leader Vexathera, her 4 arms managing multiple control stations simultaneously. "The supply depot's defenses are blind to our approach." Marcus nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the largest Zephyrian military supply depot in this sector of space. Intelligence suggested that its destruction would cripple Empire operations across 17 star systems. More importantly, it would demonstrate that the cooperation between humans and Thrillaxians had evolved from desperate necessity into unstoppable force. "Zixandra, are your infiltration teams ready?" he asked through the communication system. Her voice came back immediately, calm and confident despite the danger she was about to face. "Ready, Marcus. My teams are in position inside the depot. We will disable their internal defenses on your signal." Marcus smiled, remembering the broken refugee he had found dying in alien sand. That Zixandra was gone, replaced by someone who had become the most effective special operations commander in either military. The medical procedures that had saved her life had enhanced her far beyond normal Thrillaxian capabilities, making her faster, stronger, and more resilient than any of her species had ever been. "All units. This is Colonel Chen," he announced on the fleet-wide channel. 2 years ago, a human and a Thrillaxian proved that our species could work together. Today we prove that cooperation can accomplish what neither of us could achieve alone." The attack began with devastating precision. Human ships, their weapons enhanced with Thrillaxian biotechnology, engaged the depot's defensive platforms while Thrillaxian vessels, equipped with human shield generators, penetrated the facility's protective barriers. The coordination was flawless, each species compensating for the other's weaknesses while amplifying their strengths. Inside the depot, Zixandra led her mixed species infiltration teams through corridors filled with automated defenses and Zephyrian security forces. Her enhanced abilities allowed her to move through energy barriers that would have killed normal beings, while her human teammates provided covering fire with weapons designed specifically for fighting Empire forces. "Marcus," she reported as her team reached the depot's central core, "we have located the main computer system, beginning data extraction now." The information they were gathering would do more than just cripple this facility. The depot's computers contained strategic intelligence about Empire operations throughout the galaxy, intelligence that could enable coordinated strikes against dozens of military targets. But the Empire wasn't surrendering their prize easily. Reinforcement fleets were converging on the depot from 3 different directions, forcing Marcus to make difficult tactical decisions about how long they could maintain their assault. "Unity Squadron, this is Admiral Martinez aboard the Relentless," came a transmission from the fleet command ship. "Zephyrian reinforcements will arrive in 30 minutes. We need to expedite the operation." Marcus studied the tactical situation, weighing risks and opportunities with the enhanced decision-making capabilities that came from years of cooperation with Thrillaxian tactical doctrine. The safe choice would be to extract immediately with whatever intelligence they had gathered. The human choice was to push harder and get everything. "Zixandra, how much more time do you need?" he asked. 20 minutes for complete data extraction," she replied, her voice tight with concentration as she worked on alien computer systems. "But Marcus, this information, it's beyond what we expected. They have detailed plans for the next phase of their expansion. Multiple species are targeted for conquest, including several that still consider the Empire their ally." Marcus made his decision with the stubborn determination that had defined his species throughout their history. "All units establish defensive perimeter. We're staying until the job is done." The next 20 minutes became the longest in Unity Squadron's history. Wave after wave of Zephyrian defenders threw themselves against the combined human Thrillaxian fleet, only to be repelled by tactics that neither species could have executed alone. Human adaptability combined with Thrillaxian precision created strategies that confounded Empire commanders who had never faced truly coordinated resistance. "Data extraction complete," Zixandra finally announced. "All teams prepare for emergency evacuation." The withdrawal was as precisely coordinated as the attack had been. Human ships provided covering fire, while Thrillaxian vessels used their superior maneuverability to extract infiltration teams under intense enemy fire. By the time the Zephyrian reinforcements arrived, Unity Squadron was already jumping to hyperspace, leaving behind a crippled supply depot and confused enemies. In the aftermath, as they reviewed the captured intelligence in the safety of friendly space, Marcus and Zixandra found themselves alone on the Harmony's observation deck. The data they had gathered would change everything, providing the Alliance with strategic advantages that could potentially end the war within a decade. "We did it," Zixandra said quietly, watching the stars stream past as they traveled toward home. "When you found me dying in that desert, could you have imagined this?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I knew you were someone worth saving. I didn't know you were someone who would help save the galaxy." Zixandra's carapace shifted to the color pattern that Marcus had learned indicated deep contentment and affection. "I have been thinking about something you said during the diplomatic conference. You called me a friend, not just an ally." "You are a friend," Marcus confirmed. "The best friend anyone could ask for." In Thrillaxian culture, we have a concept that does not translate well into human language. It describes the bond between individuals who have shared life-changing experiences, who have risked everything for each other. The closest human equivalent might be family. Marcus nodded, understanding what she was trying to express. In human culture, we say that friends are the family you choose for yourself. "Then we have chosen well," Zixandra replied. "And through our choice, our entire species have learned to make the same choice." Marcus looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, other human and Thrillaxian crews were working together, fighting together, and proving every day that cooperation was stronger than conquest. The Zephyrian Empire had spent centuries dividing the galaxy against itself, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated what happened when humans decided that something was worth protecting. "What's our next mission?" Zixandra asked, already eager for their next adventure. Marcus smiled, pulling up the tactical reports that were already flooding in from across the Alliance. "Well, there's this Empire stronghold in the Centauri system that intelligence thinks is impossible to crack." "Perfect," Zixandra interrupted, her translator somehow conveying her grin. "I was getting bored with merely difficult missions." Marcus laughed, remembering his first impression of the dying rebel he had found in alien sand. She had been stubborn then, refusing to surrender even when death seemed certain. Now that stubbornness had infected an entire galaxy, teaching two species that some things were worth any sacrifice to protect. It was, Marcus reflected, a very human lesson. But it was one that Thrillaxians had learned with enthusiasm. Together they had become something neither species could have achieved alone. They had become unstoppable.